Because you have directly asked the question, Senator Schiff, please permit me the chance to answer it head on using this particular record, declared Kash Patel. His tone remained incredibly stable, entirely lacking the dramatic shaking typically present during instances of intense political tension. The surrounding chamber served as an impressive stage for American governance, lined with dark, formidable mahogany and brightened by the severe, relentless shine of broadcast spotlights. 14 high-resolution television cameras locked onto his location, their crimson recording lights radiating like staring eyes, broadcasting every subtle facial movement to a projected crowd of 1.9 million spectators watching on C-SPAN and multiple affiliated news channels. Moving with intentional, well-rehearsed precision, Patel opened a stiff, red-edged binder. Those vivid scarlet margins served as a clear indicator inside the intelligence sphere. They indicated documents that had officially shed their classified status but still bore the lingering gravity of state secrets. Reaching within, he pulled out a lone, separate piece of paper, resting it carefully yet securely on the sleek top of the witness table. This specific sheet featured strictly controlled classification seals at the top and bottom, harsh letter and number codes that the overwhelming majority of the nation's citizens have never seen and will never completely comprehend. These indicators represented the document's former intensely guarded life hidden away within an underground, temperature-regulated bunker. It constituted highly restricted data meant exclusively for personnel possessing the highest, most elite security approvals. Under no standard conditions was a record of this caliber ever meant to appear on a plain wooden table during a widely broadcast public Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. However, the past of this particular page was significantly more sinister than its security stamps indicated. Exactly 6 months earlier, this very same file had been thrown away, cast aside casually but deliberately into a specific disposal container, generally referred to as a burn bag, at the primary headquarters of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Washington, D.C. Somebody hidden far inside the agency's complex bureaucracy had deposited it there with the clear goal of seeing it permanently destroyed, reduced to powdery ash within an industrial furnace, effectively obliterating its details from recorded history for all time. However, thanks to an exhaustive review and an unrelenting pursuit of the facts, it had incredibly escaped destruction. On the other side of the massive solid wood desk, the atmosphere within the chamber started to subtly alter. The right hand of Senator Adam Schiff, previously relaxing easily upon his leather-covered notebook, moved gradually in the direction of his moisture-covered water glass. Abruptly, it paused. His fingertips lingered stiffly, merely an inch over the rim of the glass, trapped in a strained, frozen instant of indecision between grabbing a drink and pulling away from an approaching danger. Gradually and cautiously, he retracted his hand back to the top of the desk, abandoning the beverage. Just behind him, his youthful, impeccably attired legislative aide leaned forward closely, forehead wrinkled, detecting the sudden shift in the room's tension. Positioned in the middle of the platform, the committee chairman tweaked his reading spectacles, quietly watching the single sheet of paper. Patel had foreseen this exact occurrence, biding his time steadfastly for 7 difficult, punishing years while suffering through societal mockery and career isolation. Furthermore, the proceedings, which were booked for a customary 2-hour window, had only recently begun. Initially, the formal congressional schedule had designated this meeting to center completely on ordinary, routine FBI bureaucratic improvements. Occupying his imposing role as a veteran figure on the Senate Judiciary Committee, California Senator Adam Schiff had carefully composed precisely 12 minutes of standard supervisory questions. His ready dialogue, sitting tidily in front of him, addressed essentially tedious subjects: the convoluted method of allocating budgets among regional centers, the intricate organizational restructuring of local field branches, and the Bureau's shifting, frequently tense relationship with the wider national security apparatus. These were the precise varieties of customary anticipated oversight inquiries intended to draw out tedious bureaucratic replies, procedural conversations culminating in procedural follow-ups, and in the end, procedural emptiness. Schiff had delivered his opening prompt with the polished, rehearsed authority of a lifelong politician holding 24 years of uninterrupted legislative background. He completely comprehended the unspoken, rigid law of the hearing room. The questioner who controls the inquiries essentially dictates the ambiance of the space, its storyline, and its historical record, whereas the individual providing the answers acts solely at the committee's behest. It was an interaction that flawlessly reflected the massive, insurmountable divide between absolute authority and institutional submission. Director Patel, would you be able to extensively outline for this committee the exact practical steps the Bureau has executed during the preceding financial year to restore societal faith following the recognized widespread failures of the Russia investigation? Schiff had inquired merely a few seconds prior. By every standard metric of Washington politics, it was a tactically impeccable question. It was designed flawlessly to portray Schiff as the logical, commanding, and profoundly troubled overseer, while concurrently framing Patel as the protective spokesman for a severely broken organization urgently needing rigid congressional oversight. The inquiry naturally created a firm power dynamic. The senator placed safely on top, with the director situated firmly underneath. Nevertheless, Patel completely discarded this accepted interaction. He refused the underlying assumption, and he rejected his designated part as the yielding organizational caretaker. I value the inquiry, Senator. The credibility of our institutions is undeniably an essential pillar of our democracy, Patel answered, his voice completely lacking any submissiveness. However, prior to plunging into our precise bureaucratic and organizational improvements, I am obligated to introduce certain historical documents into the formal committee logs. They connect precisely and inseparably to the core issue of how that societal faith was disastrously undermined to begin with. The jaw of Schiff subtly clenched, the muscles tightening right under his complexion. He shifted his seating stance by just a tiny fraction of an inch, the automatic, microscopic action of a person who abruptly understands that a strictly planned dialogue has violently drifted from its anticipated set course, compelling him to quickly reevaluate his entire approach on the spot. Director Patel, I would heavily favor that you adhere specifically to the inquiry. Exactly as it was posed, Schiff fired back, his tone taking on a more cutting, commanding quality in an effort to aggressively retake command over the direction of the hearing. Undeterred by the senator's bid for bureaucratic superiority, Patel commenced reading off dates. He talked with the objective, systematic exactness of an experienced judicial clerk entering consecutive docket numbers into a city system, completely devoid of drama, fabricated sentiment, or any anticipation that anyone would consider the raw dates alone to be engaging. The 22nd of March 2017, Patel proclaimed, allowing the ordinary date to linger in the silent room before trailing it with a stunning disclosure. The premiere broadcast of NBC News, Meet the Press. Representative Adam Schiff at the time announces to a countrywide viewership, and I quote word for word from the formal broadcast record, "There is more than circumstantial evidence now suggesting collusion between Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and Russia." Patel transitioned fluidly to the subsequent file within his thick pile. The 2nd of April 2017, State of the Union on CNN. Congressman Schiff declares absolutely to the host, "I can tell you there is evidence that is not circumstantial and is very much worthy of investigation." Another sheet flipped, the sharp noise of thick parchment turning, resonating across the highly sensitive room microphones the 23rd of July, 2017. Yet again, on Meet the Press, Congressman Schiff points out his profound worry that, quote, President Trump's actions might be influenced by personal interests and potential Russian leverage. During this crushing litany, Patel never once raised his eyes to assess the response of the chamber. His focus stayed firmly anchored on the documents in front of him, reading the words with the structured, horizontal focus of an experienced DOJ lawyer tracing complicated terrorist funding webs, or a legislative researcher analyzing thousands of sheets of obscure evidentiary records. He functioned smoothly, vocalizing the condemning files as easily and fundamentally as breathing, completely devoid of any desire to act for the massive audience viewing from their residences. He kept enumerating the prolonged, multi-year press offensive that had overtaken the political conversation of the country. October 2017, during prime viewing hours on MSNBC alongside Rachel Maddow, Congressman Schiff asserts he is unable to discuss classified specifics, but guarantees the audience that he considers the proof of collusion to be damning. Skipping ahead to March 2018 on CNN alongside Anderson Cooper, Congressman Schiff maintains there is abundant proof concealed in plain view. Shifting to February 2019 on Face the Nation via CBS, Congressman Schiff claims with certainty that collusion undoubtedly exists. Patel systematically placed the 7 date-ordered logs across the surface of the desk. Every document clearly showcased the exact day, the television channel, and the condemning statement in vibrant yellow highlighter, a traditional standard legal display formulated to transform an adversarial subject's own repeated public declarations into an indisputable pile of proof. Across a period of 3 chaotic years, the former representative had repeated this monumental, earth-shattering assertion, or a meaningful version of it, over national broadcast channels a minimum of 21 distinct times. He had methodically armed his commanding position as the minority leader and later the influential head of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, a profoundly clandestine group charged with the nation's most closely held, delicate state secrets. He utilized that armor of power to bestow upon his television features an aura of total, undeniable authenticity. After demonstrating the sheer magnitude of the senator's assertions, Patel then moved to a new, specifically marked divider inside his protected crimson-edged binder. He referenced the exhaustive, highly expensive conclusions of Special Counsel Robert Mueller, formally handed over to the Department of Justice on the 18th of April, 2019. The exhaustive report by Special Counsel Mueller, Patel recited, clearly determined that the prolonged historic inquiry produced zero concrete evidence of any collaboration, plot, or collusion linking individuals from the Trump campaign and the Russian government concerning election meddling operations. Flipping to still another section, Patel pointed out the later results from the report of Special Counsel John Durham, officially presented several years afterward on the 15th of May, 2023. Special Counsel Durham stated that the sweeping Crossfire Hurricane investigation by the FBI was launched based entirely on raw, unanalyzed, and uncorroborated intelligence. Moreover, Durham eventually concluded that the Bureau completely forsook its rigid mandate of lawful adherence, participating in profoundly concerning investigatory overstep. Shutting the extensively marked portion of the binder, Patel placed both of his palms evenly upon the top with deliberate, flawless physical balance. It represented the intensely regimented stance of an individual highly skilled at concealing his inner emotions, and he was performing the action perfectly. Senator Schiff promised the citizens of America on 21 distinct, heavily publicized instances that he held real, physical proof of collusion. Patel announced, his tone slicing through the oppressive quiet of the chamber. 2 separate special investigators, functioning with practically boundless funding and the power of subpoena, devoted 8 combined years to exploring this exact concept. Neither discovered any such proof, The concrete evidence the senator bragged about having has never appeared. It has never been classified, never been recorded, and never been summarized in any open or secretive environment. He finally lifted his face and stared directly at Schiff. The look was not dramatically hostile. It was missing the fabricated indignation frequent in legislative sessions. Instead, it was the burdensome, steady, total stare of an attorney trapping an adversarial testifier during a vicious cross-questioning, an expression bearing the deep, indisputable gravity of an individual who already possesses all the factual replies to the inquiries he is preparing to ask. Senator, my career history encompasses demanding positions as a federal prosecutor as well as a public defender. I have argued intricate lawsuits in federal jurisdictions, serving in both of those roles, Patel stated quietly, tilting a bit nearer to the audio receiver. Within the judicial framework of America, when a person continuously claims to a magistrate or a panel that they possess concrete proof 21 distinct times, yet in the end reveals absolutely nothing, we possess a highly specific, harsh term for that. He allowed the specific term to remain unsaid. He had no necessity to vocalize it. He permitted the overwhelmingly loud, stifling stillness of the room, along with the shared awareness of the 1.9 million spectators viewing from their homes, to psychologically fill the gap. The unspoken charge hovered in the space, morphing into the most deafening, most echoing noise in the entire chamber. Frantic to recover his quickly crumbling foundation, Schiff leaned fiercely toward his audio receiver. His body was tense, his previously tranquil behavior swapped for the crisp, procedural, and abrupt rhythm of an experienced lawmaker feverishly clutching at administrative rescue lines to protect himself from imminent career ruin. Point of order, Mr. Chairman Schiff interrupted abruptly, brandishing the complicated regulations of legislative protocol as a protective barrier. Director Patel is explicitly commandeering this supervisory session to re-argue intensely partisan matters that have already been comprehensively finished by multiple previous probes. His present string of remarks exists completely beyond the established jurisdictional boundaries of this committee. The leader of the committee, an experienced Republican hailing from Iowa, looked over the upper rim of his reading spectacles. He held the tranquil, unhurried presence of a man who had managed 14 comparable combative meetings that same year and intended to oversee 14 additional ones before the break. He gazed down at Schiff with an expression of slight, unbothered interest. The testifier is specifically speaking to the central issue of the Bureau's underlying trustworthiness, a subject the senator himself expressly brought up in his initial series of questions. The chairman conclusively decided, his tone resounding with absolute closure. The testifier remains entirely inside the boundaries of the hearing. The testifier is permitted to continue. The initial protective action from Schiff, a strategic move intended to forcefully pivot the perilous discussion back to secure administrative territory, shattered immediately. It fell apart against the gavel of the chairman, much like a delicate, frantic ocean swell smashing uselessly into a dense, unbending retaining wall. The retaining wall remained solid, the swell dispersed. Patel, peacefully, without a hint of victory, turned his binder to the following carefully arranged piece of evidence. I hold one last intensely crucial piece for this particular portion of my statement. This specific file was officially stripped of its classified status only a short time ago, in March 2026. It is a domestic, intensely guarded memo stemming from the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Its date is exactly the 8th of March 2017. Patel stopped, giving the date time to echo. That is precisely 14 days before the senator's first open claim on countrywide television of holding more than circumstantial evidence. His voice stayed a monotone, steady, administrative drone. He allowed the ruinous terms to rest entirely on their own, comprehending that the raw realities did not need any dramatic vocal changes or theatrical stress to reach their greatest effect. This formal memo details an intensely classified private FBI update given straightforwardly to the top members of the committee, notably encompassing the ranking member during that period. The recap states clearly, and without any vagueness, that agents of the FBI classified the underlying factual groundwork for the whole Russia investigation as totally preliminary and unsubstantiated. Patel recited fluidly, his digit following the text. The presence of the ranking member at this very update is solidly, unchangeably confirmed by the formal co-signed attendance record of the committee. Patel released the unclassified document onto the middle of the desk. It visually merged with the 7 television logs and the conclusions of the 2 special investigators, creating an undeniable 10-page sequential history of intentional dishonesty. The harsh, frightening truth of the sequence dawned in the consciousness of all those in attendance exactly 14 days prior to Senator Schiff boldly broadcasting his assertions of having firm, undeniable proof to the whole country. He had rested silently in a restricted, protected meeting space and was directly, explicitly notified by the upper echelons of the FBI that their intelligence information was completely unconfirmed and baseless. This disclosure hit the chamber similar to a physical strike to the chest. It was not an abrupt intake of air, but instead an expanding, noticeable surge of disbelief and tightness that flowed backwards from the individuals on the panel, moving through the thick lines of the journalist section and outwards through the camera scopes to the millions of residents in their houses. Every single person reached the precise same unavoidable realization at the exact same pace. Schiff was aware of the absolute reality. He was specifically advised the assertions were entirely unfounded, and he intentionally appeared on broadcast television to communicate the precise opposite to the populace regardless. Schiff stayed completely stiff in his seat, both of his palms pushed level and forcefully onto the deep brown desk, pinning his own physical form in position to stop any noticeable shaking. Without broadcasting his upcoming action or letting the stress fade, Patel effortlessly moved to an entirely different portion of his files. He exhibited the systematic, continuous concentration of a skilled doctor moving neatly to the subsequent vital stage of an intricate, life-preserving procedure without experiencing the smallest urge to explain his internal thoughts to the watching audience. My purpose right now is to thoroughly demonstrate precisely how this entire massive storyline was fabricated, not simply echoed by eager participants, but carefully designed and constructed from its very foundation. Because what transpired throughout the chaotic period covering 2016 to 2019 was definitely not a collection of unintentional, well-meaning mistakes by overly enthusiastic agents. It represented a calculated, premeditated structure of political ruin, Patel declared. He extracted a substantial, elaborately crafted visual diagram printed across a single, extra-large sheet. It was the exact style of convoluted linking chart frequently employed by federal attorneys during massive RICO syndicate trials to trace illegal streams of hidden funds, illicit directives, or concealed political sway. During 2016, the Democratic National Committee, alongside the presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton, jointly consent to employ the opposition research company Fusion GPS. Patel detailed his digit actually trailing the dark strokes linking the squares on the diagram, an unusual bodily action from an individual who had scarcely shifted a fraction since the session commenced. Fusion GPS subsequently formally hires Christopher Steele, a former British spy. Steele goes on to invent what is presently referred to as the Steele dossier, 35 sheets of crazy unconfirmed claims alleging a profound, secretive collaboration linking the inner circle of Donald Trump and the state of Russia. Patel shifted his digit to the subsequent point. This file travels directly to the upper echelons of the FBI. The Bureau, although aware of its partisan roots, actively utilizes this file as the primary, crucial element for multiple requests to the profoundly clandestine Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, the FISA court. Their objective: to obtain sweeping, intrusive orders permitting the complete digital monitoring of Carter Page, an American national and an advisor for the Trump campaign. Moving to the succeeding file in his pile, Patel brought attention to the harsh 2019 review by Department of Justice Inspector General Michael Horowitz regarding these exact, heavily disputed FISA requests. Inspector General Horowitz discovered 17 individual, highly critical mistakes, exclusions, and total falsehoods. Not a single accidental mistake. Not 3. 17, Patel stressed, his tone becoming a bit more resolute. This encompassed the intentional, willful failure to reveal to the FISA magistrates that an opposing political campaign had monetarily supported the document. Even worse, they concealed the essential detail that the document's very own main subsource had specifically admitted to Bureau agents that the information held within was equivalent to nothing more than simple rumor and speculation. Patel placed the dense IG executive summary down onto the desk with a solid thud. The Bureau was aware the file was missing fundamental validation. They were aware their primary source considered it conjectural gossip. Still, they purposely armed it to monitor a civilian American citizen. And the senator, the exact individual designated by the Constitution with strictly monitoring this massive intelligence network to prevent such misuses, recited this invented opposition-financed paper right into the formal legislative record of the United States. He offered it to history not as a questionable claim, but as confirmed, validated reality. Patel stated, his gaze fastening onto Schiff with piercing focus. You recited a fraudulent file, funded by a panicked political campaign, written by a citizen of another country, and grounded on admitted gossip directly into the formal, lasting logs of the United States Congress. And you gazed directly into the lenses and offered it to the citizens of America as indisputable fact. The mouth of Schiff opened in a frantic objection, prepared to fire off a further defense, while his legal advisor promptly set a solid hand upon the senator's arm, a quiet, pressing, physical caution in the universal dialect of attorneys ordering their patron to back off and stay quiet. Point of order, Schiff initiated, his tone fracturing a bit. Patel peacefully, easily rolled over the interjection without even lifting the volume of his tone. Senator, I am not done, Patel declared simply. He delivered a basic administrative truth that successfully rendered the senator's frantic protest lifeless in the space. The leader of the committee folded his arms and decided against stepping in, allowing Schiff's objection to remain totally unfinished, dangling uncomfortably in the quiet, similar to a falling cup that had not yet impacted the ground. Having entirely neutralized the senator's effort to break the stream of data, Patel advanced ahead into completely fresh, highly perilous new ground. Upon formally taking on the massive duty of FBI director during 2025, one of my absolute initial orders was commanding my personnel to perform a huge, sweeping internal review of both physical and electronic records tied to the Crossfire Hurricane probe. Over the course of that exhaustive review, we uncovered a profoundly alarming revelation. We located thousands of formal, deeply classified papers shoved carelessly inside burn bags far down in the subterranean floors of FBI headquarters, Patel disclosed. He stopped for a moment, letting the heavy gravity of the phrase settle into the thoughts of the committee panel, very much like dense cement pillars dropping into solid rock to brace an enormous bridge. For anybody unfamiliar with standard security procedures, burn bags are thick-walled receptacles used solely for the safe, permanent burning of classified documents. These crucial historical files were formally scheduled for total eradication. Yet, Because of pure chance or internal ineptitude, they had not yet been incinerated. They were discovered, intercepted, and concealed inside a protected, overlooked space that was completely omitted from the building's formal layout and supply catalog, he detailed. He elevated another severe red-edged piece of parchment. The security codes plainly observable even to the journalists positioned in the third rank of the seating area. Included in these rescued, almost obliterated documents were internal, deeply classified legal reviews from the FBI. These papers clearly stated that the required credibility evaluation regarding the sources of the Steele dossier was definitively not completed prior to FISA's submission. The Bureau's very own internal lawyers specifically highlighted the deadly, unconstitutional issue. Still, the executives advanced the monitoring requests anyway, purposely deceiving a clandestine tribunal, Patel articulated, setting the condemning paper down upon the expanding stack. However, importantly, there is a distinct handwritten note scrawled across the borders of this retrieved legal analysis. The writing distinctly states, HPSCI ranking member briefed on source limitations. Patel tilted forward, his bodily presence overtaking the area. You were informed regarding these critical deadly defects prior to ever validating the document within the corridors of Congress. You were cautioned prior to going on to nationwide television 21 times. And you were cautioned prior to looking into the lens and pledging to the American populace that you possessed indisputable evidence of betrayal. You were informed clearly inside a restricted, protected environment by the most senior officials within the FBI that the underlying information was fundamentally untrustworthy. The quiet within the room intensified dramatically. It became so burdensome and deep that the quiet, automated drone of the facility's massive air system turned into the solitary background noise, not due to it growing noisier, but since the inhalation of every individual in the space had simultaneously halted, the hands of Patel stayed completely motionless, sitting upon the binder. However, for the absolute first moment since he took his seat, the flesh pulled taut across his joints, gleamed a stark pale hue along the margins, revealing an enormous, severely managed inner rage that was discernible only to those located in the very closest rows. I wish to contribute an individual thought, Patel stated, his tone falling half a pitch. The abrupt, unforeseen change in his speech from administrative objectivity to profound internal contemplation severely changed the atmospheric density of the room. Throughout my personal, deep, multi-year inquiry into these shadowy subjects, while I functioned as the lead investigator for the House Intelligence Committee performing the exact constitutional duty, I was enlisted by the citizens of America to perform the FBI purposely and unlawfully carried out monitoring on me. They vindictively utilized advanced military-level information tactics against my person. They sought to completely and forever invalidate my crucial inquiry by initiating an organized reputation destruction effort against the person investigating, Patel detailed. He kept his stiff, uncompromising stance. His tone stayed stable, in spite of the noticeable, severe clenching of his digits holding the binder's rim with sufficient strength to warp the thick paperboard. However, I did not halt. I continued investigating. I excavated through the falsehoods, and I discovered exactly what they so frantically attempted to conceal within those disposal bags. And presently, in spite of their greatest attempts to ruin my existence, I am sitting within this seat functioning as the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the exact same potent organization that previously unlawfully pursued me, he declared, a subtle, undeniable dignity emanating from his speech. Patel fastened a sharp, unwavering stare straight onto the pale visage of Schiff. And you, Senator, you are occupying that cozy seat acting as a United States Senator acting for the massive state of California. You are the precise, identical person who utilized your massive stage to guarantee the citizens of America that I was nothing besides a perilous, unhinged conspiracy monger hunting shadows. Patel allowed a burdensome silence to hang in the space. One of us was right. That lone, asserting phrase overpowered the chamber, similar to a massive steel safe door slamming closed, trapping everybody within alongside the reality. On a single end of the mahogany desk sat an influential lawmaker who had continuously guaranteed the reality of imaginary, traitorous proof and delivered absolutely zero. On the opposing end sat a resolute, unyielding detective who had pinpointed an enormous systemic fraud and carefully demonstrated it using the records. Following 7 agonizing, painful years of nationwide polarization and suspicion, they ultimately sat a mere 72 inches away. The undeniable, unclassified reality, carefully recorded inside a crimson binder, was presently forcefully facing the 21 televised falsehoods resting strictly next to it. Patel definitively snapped the secret folder closed. The quiet, amazingly exact noise of the heavy paper meeting rebounded across the receiver like a conclusive, solid punctuation mark finishing an expansive, devastating, multi-year phrase. Placing his palms evenly on top of the sealed document, Patel shifted toward his ultimate summation. I wish to conclude my statement today using a chronology. However, this does not represent a timeline of secret information, but instead a sequence of repercussions, or, more precisely, the complete, astonishing lack of repercussions within Washington, he stated. He totally avoided bringing out any fresh files for this portion, entirely cognizant that this concluding, shadowy phase of the past was sadly a point of open history, easily searchable by anybody possessing a mobile device and a simple web connection. Starting in 2017 until the conclusion of 2019, Congressman Schiff at the time features on nationwide broadcast television a minimum of 21 occurrences, vociferously claiming to hold undeniable, hidden proof of Trump-Russia collusion. This proof is never, at any moment, presented. In April of 2019, the Mueller document discovers zero collusion. In May of 2023, the Durham document concludes the whole massive investigation was founded on unverified, partisanly driven information. As a result, on the 21st of June, 2023, the House of Representatives of the United States takes the unusual, monumental action to officially condemn Adam Schiff for participating in deceiving the citizens of America, disseminating lies, and shockingly misusing his clearance to classified intelligence. Patel recounted, his tone echoing with total distinctness. Patel stopped once more, his gaze shrinking as he highlighted the repulsive ridiculousness of the direct aftermath. And what represented the senator's reaction to this monumental, severe career humiliation? He stood at the rostrum of the House of Representatives as his official condemnation was spoken aloud to the country, and he grinned. He glanced upward toward the balcony lenses, and he smirked. He allowed that haughty visual to rest within the thoughts of the electorate. And subsequently, he immediately pivoted and utilized that precise official condemnation, a harsh constitutional penalty for deceiving the nation into a gigantic $8.1 million fundraising harvest. The punishment was blatantly transformed into an incredibly profitable monetary occurrence. And ultimately, in 2024, massively bankrolled by the profits of his very own deception, he secured a highly sought-after election to the Senate of the United States. Patel concluded with sharp, clinical exactness. Pushing his palms downward onto the table a last time, Patel ignored Schiff completely and spoke to the television lenses directly, talking right to the citizens of America. The senator stated he possessed proof 21 times. A pair of distinct special investigators located nothing. The House condemned him for deceiving. He collected $8.1 million resulting from that exact condemnation, and subsequently he was elevated to the higher chamber of the Senate. I dedicated 7 years looking into the reality. I was unlawfully monitored. I was ruthlessly maligned within the media, and I was labeled a crazed conspiracy theorist by the exact individual sitting opposite from me. The facts, as recorded inside these unclassified records, proved to be precisely what I stated they were. The plot proved to be precisely what he stated it was not. He currently serves as a senator. I currently serve as the FBI director. I will permit the citizens of America, as well as history, to determine which one of these two results represents the genuine domestic outrage. Patel carefully straightened the borders of his crimson binder alongside the crisp rim of the witness table, a tiny, regulated action of an individual who maintains his proof as well as his existence in absolute arrangement. Mr. Chairman, I possess no further statements. For the following 47 minutes of the planned session, Adam Schiff stayed entirely motionless within his comfortable leather chair, physically incapable of escaping his very own committee meeting without projecting a total, degrading public loss. He rested there, completely quiet, suffering through the punishing rest of the event as alternative lawmakers posed their inquiries. He failed to speak a single subsequent question, his audio receiver lifeless, while his terrified legislative assistant frantically jotted down nonstop, frantic damage control messages for their emergency PR squad standing by in the stone corridors outdoors. During the entirety of it, the bright red binder of Patel stayed prominently sealed upon the table, a constant, irrefutable optical display that the attorney absolutely declined to remove until the concluding strike of the gavel landed. Inside of 24 brief hours, the 11-second multimedia snippet of Patel speaking the sentence, "One of us was right," detonated across every single digital networking site, amassing upward of 6 million impressions overnight. It immediately turned into the country's most distributed, most scrutinized political clip, a pristine, concentrated summary of 7 years of intense domestic inquiry, squashed down into one single destructive instance. Unsurprisingly, the media team for Schiff issued a heavily sanitized, sterile news release seeking to brush off the whole disastrous incident as simple partisan theater performed by a rogue political hire paying back personal grievances. Revealingly, however, the extensive news brief entirely bypassed the central, undeniable proof. It failed to speak to the 14-day inconsistency. It completely disregarded the reality of the retrieved burn bag files. It provided zero justification regarding the 21 broadcast logs. They provided absolutely zero opposing proof, choosing instead to protectively reiterate the term theater within 3 distinct sections, acting as though stating a descriptor loudly enough might miraculously change the texture of truth. Across the online realm, edited videos comparing Schiff's frantic point-of-order interruptions alongside Patel's unrelenting, tranquil evidentiary barrage saturated the web. These side-by-side cuts viciously revealed the parliamentary tactics of Schiff, not as valid judicial instruments, but instead as panicked, automatic spasms, the legislative equivalent of a fighter lifting his mitts to guard his visage from a devastating strike. By the conclusion of the week, the repercussions magnified. An official, profoundly comprehensive grievance landed on the surface of the Senate Ethics Committee, heavily referencing the recently unclassified HPSCI memo. The grievance called for a complete, vigorous probe regarding whether Senator Schiff intentionally and spitefully distorted classified domestic intelligence seeking personal, political, as well as monetary benefit. Legal commentators throughout CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News individually verified that the burn bag disclosures provoked massive, unanswered, and profoundly concerning inquiries concerning the judicial truthfulness of Schiff's earlier legislative statements. The amount $8.1 million quickly surpassed its mathematical worth, shifting overnight into a sinister cultural abbreviation for a profoundly rotten, shattered legislative environment where obvious dishonesty is not simply ignored by the framework, but is enormously, disgustingly compensated by it. When pushed by forceful journalists regarding the future of Schiff during a subsequent FBI media conference, Patel preserved his stiff, impassive demeanor. "The files shall speak on behalf of themselves," he proclaimed plainly, declining to expand any more because a genuine attorney understands the moment to allow the proof to perform the speaking. Miles away from the shouting journalists of Capitol Hill, in a sparsely decorated Northern Virginia apartment, Carter Page sat in the dim light by a rain-streaked window. He watched the continuous rebroadcast of the explosive congressional session on a muted television screen. An esteemed former naval officer and highly educated energy consultant, Page had volunteered for a presidential campaign out of civic duty, only to see his life irreversibly destroyed in October 2016. The crushing weight of the federal government had targeted him, successfully obtaining a profoundly intrusive FISA warrant. This mandate relied almost entirely on the debunked Steele dossier, the exact rumor-filled, opposition-funded document Adam Schiff had aggressively championed as sacred truth. That single, unlawful warrant stripped Page of his privacy, honor, and humanity, reducing a living, breathing man to a sensationalized newsbanner. He was relentlessly branded a Russian agent, a Kremlin informant, and a national security threat. His face flashed endlessly across cable news, his reputation dragged through the mud by hosts who knew nothing of his service. This suffocating stigma evaporated his lucrative career, ruined his lifelong professional connections, and completely erased the tranquil life he once enjoyed. For 7 punishing years, he endured the horrific fallout alone. He couldn't even step inside a cafe without wondering if the strangers sitting opposite him only saw a traitor. Now, watching FBI Director Kash Patel calmly recite unclassified evidence proving the Bureau knew the intelligence was unverified from the very start, the massive burden of reality settled heavily on Page's shoulders. Schiff had been exhaustively briefed on the dossier's fatal defects. He knew the sources were fabricated, yet he still marched boldly onto national television 21 distinct times to vigorously promote the falsehood, consciously tearing down Page's life piece by piece while fully aware the foundational document was uncorroborated trash. Gradually reaching for the remote, Page powered off the television. In the darkened glass of the window, his reflection emerged older, leaner, his eyes carrying the exhausted look of a man who had existed as a divisive caricature rather than a human being. 7 years, he whispered into the silent emptiness of his home. Capitol Hill, with its majestic chambers and concealed burn bags, was merely a dozen miles away, but resting in the gloom, it felt like an insurmountable gap. The crimson-rimmed binder had finally been opened, and the files meant for the incinerator had incredibly survived. The powerful architect of the fraud had been publicly confronted by the relentless investigator who exposed it. Page understood this wasn't absolute justice. True retribution requires immediate, harsh accountability. He remained uncertain if systemic justice would ever genuinely materialize in Washington. However, watching Patel drop that undeniable, explosive binder onto the committee table offered a profound, quiet vindication. It wasn't enough to magically restore his stolen years, but as the rain struck the glass, he knew it was definitively something.